Okay, today we're going to do a slightly different one. So this is an introduction to embodiment coaching. This is our specialism. If you're listening to the podcast, you hear me do lots of guests, but I'm not primarily a podcaster. I'm primarily an embodiment teacher. But I'd say one of the biggest groups was coaches, helping coaches work with the body. If people say, what do you do for a living? That's often what I say. I'm joined today, Christina. So Christina is long-time friend and colleague. She's joining us from a hilltop in Thailand today, exotic lass that she is. Embodiment coach, trainer, background in martial arts, lots of dance, intimacy work, femininity work. Christina, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Mark. Unusual location today.
Yeah, it sounds workable. It sounds workable. Nice to see you. And Christina's also the co-teacher on the Certificate of Embodiment Coaching. And that is run by course manager Alina. She is our kind but firm German that keeps us all in order. Alina is also ICF certified coach in her own right. So she's also, I think, going to be speaking to the position of someone who's just started learning the body part of coaching, as well as being a sort of course manager for us. And how many coaches are you in contact with regularly, Alina, as course manager? Quite a few, right?
Quite a few, definitely. And it's such a pleasure to be in contact and see them learning and growing. So yeah, happy to be here.
Okay, so we're going to assume people that are listening to this got at least some interest, either they're coaches or maybe they're thinking of becoming a coach. Why would we involve the body in coaching at all? This is kind of for us, this is like but let's start at the beginning. Like, why use the body in coaching? Why not just talk about stuff, Christina?
Because so many times you can't freaking think your way out of stuff. You can think your way into a lot of problems, I think, but to think your way out of them usually proves way harder, and the body proves a lot more effective and fast, quick.
Yeah, they're the big ones. I always say to people, well, the body's quick, it's effective, it's right there. It's hard to change thinking. It's very difficult. If you say to someone, change your mind, well, how? There's a question, and embodiment is one answer to that. Or your spirit or your soul, even more abstract, right? So in kind of tantric models, we say it's the most manifest part of a human being. A human being is holistic, body, mind, emotion, spirit, all those things. But the body's the bit you can easily get to. If that sounds a bit philosophical, that just makes things quick, direct, effective. I'd say the other one is lasting. So what I've noticed is clients will have a cognitive insight about something, but they've got a way of being which holds them in place. I.e., if you don't work with the body, it will sabotage anything else. So let's say they go, I really should say no. I read a book called How to Say No, how to say no for executives or mums or whatever. Saying no is good. It helps me with my self-care. It's good for my kids and my employees. Great. And then they go back to their work or their family and they can't say no. And it's not that they cognitively have a problem with it. Their vocal cords work. They know the word no, but it's not embodied. So it's that pattern is going to sabotage any insights they have. Alina, why do you think people? Christina,
I was just going to say, and maybe I'm jumping ahead here, but the element of practicing in the body, practicing through the body, to actually have something to do, is the one that really makes it last, in my opinion or experience.
Yeah. So there's sort of a bit of a joke on my courses, isn't there? And you've seen this when people ask any question, the answer is always practice. It's something I got from Paul Linden, one of my mentors. If it's a bad question, the answer is it depends. If it's a good question, it's practice, because that's how we get better at anything. And I think this comes down to a fundamental misunderstanding of what learning is. So one of the things we introduced pretty early in the CEC course of certification, and every time I just did a workshop in Munich, I have to mention this early. Went, by the way, very well, didn't it, Alina? The Germans very teachable. I've fallen in love with Germany again.
Right? It was awesome. Really, the workshop in Munich was so well structured, and everyone was taking so much away from personal experiences, but also experience their techniques that they learned online and seeing that in real life, experiencing in real life. Yeah, as you just mentioned, it sticks differently with the body and having this felt sense of what is.
They did open all the windows, didn't they, Alina? They did open all the windows despite being -5 outside.
Despite snow.
What is it with Germans and fresh air? I don't understand. It's a bit much. So anyway, what was I learning? So generally, in most Western cultures, we think of learning as learning about something, or we think, well, I have a fact or an insight, I now know. And we even use one verb, to know, or another verb, to learn, when actually we're talking about multiple different things, because most change that's interesting or deep or meaningful, it's not about learning new information. Like, we live in an information heavy world. There's lots, lots of information. Get my phone out. But learning a skill takes practice, and learning being, we could say embodiment is an ontological approach to coaching. It's a word I got from Newfield, a coaching organization I used to work with. I did the embodied part of their courses in Europe. Sometimes I sort of make this say now to people, like, look, why are you getting what you've always got? Because you're doing what you've always done. That's normally as far as people take it. But why are you doing what you've always done? Because you're being how you've always been. Like, that's where the perception, the cognition, and ultimately the actions come from, right? So unless we get down to that level, nothing really changes. Why do you, Alina, so you kind of talk to hundreds of people, coaches or people who are becoming coaches. As the KEC manager, you're the one patiently answering all their emails and things like that. Why do you think they want to work with the body? Because, we've sold quite a lot of places on this course the last few years, and before that, Christina, we used to do it in person before the Zoom days, but we were quite early on Zoom. And why do you think so many people want to learn to work with the body? Like, why do we have a business, I guess I'm asking?
Mm-hmm. I think it has, two sides to it. So depending on where the people are coming from. So we have lots of facilitators from bodywork, dance, yoga, all these parts, where I have the feeling they want to get more into supporting people on a different level. So with more general personal stuff. Like, yeah.
So they're people who, like Christina and I both started off in Aikido.
Yeah.
Dance, right? So they're people who have got that the body is really cool and is full of wisdom and transforms your life. I got, as an Aikido guy, I was like, look, 0.001% of the population are going to do Aikido ever. And I was dancing last night, movement medicine, which is like 5 rhythms, so conscious dance. There was a tent full of hippies, but most people are never going to do that. It's wonderful, but most people don't go there. There's too many barriers to entry, and it takes a long time. So I think people in those arts, the yoga, the conscious dance, maybe even the improv, they're going, this is great, but how do I use this one-to-one, quickly, concisely, with sort of more conventional groups? Is that?
Yeah, exactly. And also on the different levels. So not only to feel great in the moment by moving in a specific way, but also to implementing that in a daily life and see what else can the body support me with in my relationship or at work, or these different elements. So not only as a hobby on the side.
Well, that tends to be the more counterculture people. Like I said, I enjoy this world. I was dancing last night with these people. It tends to be about state shifting. But then it's, how do you get either transformation as a person, or actually just very practically, or like let's say your relationship to money. Like, most of my hippie friends, they just got a horrible relationship to money. And it's how is their practice of dance or yoga or meditation, how is it actually implemented in the sort of nuts and bolts, is a big part as well, right?
Yeah, definitely.
I was also going to say, it's really bridging the best of both worlds in some way. And that was what I was looking for at the time when I trained with you back then. Was my Aikido background was wonderful, but try to explain, what you do in an Aikido class to a normal person or somebody who doesn't want to train in Aikido, but maybe there's so much value that could be gained from it. And equally, I was working on the business side in an office, but there I couldn't really bring the Aikido, and the other way around, the people maybe from the Aikido school doing Aikido every day couldn't really relate to some of the stuff I did, or my dancer friends to the stuff of the office, the business world. So translating and bridging these two worlds was really one part that I feel like is addressed here.
We take out a lot of the barriers, don't we? Like, there's a barrier of athleticism. When I used to do Aikido at 25, I didn't used to think it was particularly athletic. Now I'm a fat, middle-aged man, with sciatica. I kind of, I still do my practices, but I can see how that could be a barrier. And I guess there's another sort of cultural barrier. Like in Aikido, you have to dress up like a samurai. in yoga, there's a certain culture. You know, in the dance thing I was at last night was in a yurt, and of course there was sage, and you know, there was sort of topless, long-haired German men. You know, that would put anyone off. And there's this kind of cultural barrier that we can take away and strip it right down and go, okay, what's essential in here without all that stuff?
Yeah, unifying also, right? We have students from all over the world, and it works everywhere.
I think that's another thing we're quite strong in. Like, people sort of said to me, like, what are you good at in embodiment? I say, one, practicality, like tools that work, right? I'm not the most deeply embodied trainer, you know, like compared to some of the people we know, Christina, right? Like some of the greats and deep embodiment teachers, but we understand the range pretty well. Like Christina does martial arts and conscious dance and femininity work and meditation. And I think, how do they fit together? What pieces of the puzzle are there? You know, I'm in conscious dance last night, and some of the people I'm thinking, okay, if you were our student, we'd give you a martial arts practice, right? To get your shit together. And
it's always about finding that balance.
Well, me and you have been trying to find that balance for years, right? But at least we've got a framework and a set of maps that help us make sense of, like, you're in Thailand, you know, I'm in Algeciras in Portugal right now, which is a super alternative place. There's so much we could do on a Tuesday night, let alone Berlin. You know, there's so much, or San Francisco, there's so much we could do on a Tuesday night. I think part of the problem we help people with is, how do you want to spend your time in a way that's useful if you're into embodiment? And
connecting it to intention, I find that is the crucial point here, because it's not just, oh, I enjoy dancing and that's why I do it. Potentially it's there's something deeper that I want to cultivate, that I want to achieve in my own way of being through dancing, and then choosing maybe something that's completely out of my habitual hobbies that I would be drawn to, because they're not my usual way of being. And if I choose to develop in a certain direction, maybe putting that intention, and that's where the element of range is.
Yeah,
what we're talking about now.
Often we say that we're just doing awareness, range, and choice, right? So it's like, you know, in terms of, you know, we've broken down the skill sets a coach needs to learn. So it's not just kind of abstract. We could look at it in terms of qualities, right? Like, what quality are you trying to build through conscious dance or Aikido, whatever? But we've also got this nice map of different skill sets, the embodied intelligence model. People could find them on YouTube if they're interested, and or in my books. And that model says to the coaches, particularly who are the more straight, kind of straight-laced ones, you know, mainstream ones, because that's the other group, right, Alina? There's sort of three main groups. The counterculture people who are learning coaching, but then there's the coaches who might be business coaches, maybe have done a bit of yoga, or they've got a mindfulness app, and we give them a map of the skill sets to learn, and say, like, look, these are the places you might learn these things. And some of them, like centering, we give. Others we say, yeah, you might want to go to this online improv class, or you might want to go dance here, or here's some options for you. And I think part of what we do and teach people as embodiment coaches is kind of how to direct people, and how to say, like, hey, you might want to try this, and how to clarify people's thinking about what they're already doing.
Yeah, exactly. So definitely fully agreeing on that one. And with the coaches, this, I would say, is also a big group, learning cognitively what is coaching about, helping others, but then really getting to the point of, okay, how do I have my sessions being more effective? How do I make it stick, and having sustainable change, like we said before, right? With the practice, having the embodied felt sense of, okay, here shifted something, is so different and makes things so much quicker, in my experience, also from bringing the embodiment elements into my coaching. It changes so much if a client is going into stories, and you can then say, hey, okay, I have this technique. It's awesome. And you just get right to the point. So you stop wasting your time, but actually start working with the right problem. And it is really, I feel like, the second side of the coin that is needed to really have sustainable change. So not only the cognitive insights, but also bringing that into a felt sense, having this experience. And also, yeah, hearing from the clients how different they move on after an embodied coaching session. So they really get something out of it, instead of having this feeling of, oh yeah, I had some ideas, but it's not really tangible. But having this felt sense changes everything.
I think most of the experienced coaches, like in Munich, in face-to-face, it's the same as our online courses. There's coaches there who get that the body matters, because they're not stupid, right? They're like, of course, this is part of being a human being. Of course, you know, state changing is useful. Practice is even better to develop, you know, longer term. And on the other side of it, as a coach, right? Like we get, like we just had a conversation about how am I before this call. But I went for a walk outside because I wanted to sort of lively up. I've got a bit of a cold today and I wanted to lively up myself. Christina, you know, knew she wasn't her best today. You know, we kind of know how we are because we have awareness of that. And then we have tools to shift that. And I think coaches kind of go, okay, this is important, but what specifically do I do with myself? Because that's the 50% that often gets missed, right? Like, oh, I'm fine, but my client's screwed up. And then the other side is, okay, what do we give the client? And then effectively, we've got awareness of state, awareness of trait, shifting state as a coach and for the client. So we've effectively got 8 skills right there. And then there's the sort of listening and leadership side. So what am I actually empathizing? Am I reading people as well, state and trait? And am I able to influence them? Because even though coaches deny it, embodied influence is really, really important.
It's a thing, huh? Definitely. Yeah. And I think this is also part of what makes our course so special, and the way we approach teaching these methods is really laying the base of, okay, get to know yourself first. Right. And then we build up on that part.
Yeah, that's the first half of the course. So, and some people come, they just do that piece with us because they just want to be more embodied. Great. And that's, you know, we can concretely give you some practices. What I like about how we do this as well is that we spread it, and we've learned this over 15 years of doing courses, first in person and online, is that we've learned that layering the practices in, we had a bit of meditation, we had the centering, they have a bit of homework, and this is where it gets a bit German, right, Alina? It gets kind of nicely organized, nicely layered, and it would be hard to not grow as a person.
If you check the boxes, yeah, definitely.
The other piece there, and again, it's very German, it's efficient. We're not asking people to go do 3 hours of conscious dance a day, which would be great for your embodiment, but they haven't got time. Like most of it, like my criteria has always been with the course, and I think you do support this, is what's the amount that someone with a job and kids can do that will still be effective?
Yeah. Yeah, and like I said, with sprinkling these practices in over a longer period of time, we also help them develop this as a habit, right? So this is not a one-timer and, oh, after the course, this is done and gone. 6 months course, right?
Exactly. In 6 months, you've got another. Even if people finish the course, it's re-establish the meditation practice, right? You know, centering practice. It's like, great, you know, like it's enough time to do that. This is why I kind of, sometimes I feel like, you know, learn to do NLP in a weekend or learn to do Reiki in a weekend. And I sort of go, it's not really possible because the practice over time element isn't really there. And people need support in that, right? You can't just go, oh, go do it. Like, I know one thing people really love is the peer groups.
Definitely.
Right? It's like you get taught, but you also have that weekly peer group practice.
Yeah. In my opinion, and also what I heard from the students, it adds such a different layer. I mean, of course, right, being with your peers without the teachers is also something different. So you can really clarify some elements in case there are some questions open, or get really down to the practice part. And I heard that from so many peer groups, they stick together even after the course. So they are building friendships over time, and they support each other also on the journey that is continuing after the course to really stay on track and keeping up their practices. And yeah, this is awesome.
Christina, like, what do you think are the elements that really work to create a good embodied coach? I mean, we examine people at the end, right? We actually have video exams where we see people do sessions. We've over the years developed a kind of pass-fail criteria, which some people are shocked by. They're like, it's like, no, this is a skill. You could be better or worse at it. You know, like what do you think leads
absolutely
to better at it?
I think, I mean, you can learn all the techniques and the theory of it, but what makes the difference is to embody it yourself, to really go through that first part, which is the foundations, the embodying it yourself, knowing the tools in and out and feeling them in your own body, being able to access them. And from there to do the actual coaching, to move into working with somebody else from that place when you feel what it's like to feel more centered versus feeling stressed out, and not just learn some theory and then convey that to somebody from an empty place.
Yeah, I've learned some neuroscience and read a lot of books and seen a lot of webinars on neuroscience. Like I've seen that. I'm not going to name names, but elsewhere I've seen that mistake. It doesn't really help. We sometimes play games around this. We do like a game where you have to be as centered as possible while saying the least centered things. So it's kind of like we're all going to die. The house is burning down. Nuclear war is approaching. Everything's going wrong. But you're very relaxed doing it. And then we do the opposite, where people say the most calming things while being really stressed out. Or I do that exercising workshops where I say, everybody touch your knees, and I touch my elbows. And of course, people completely ignore the words and they all touch their elbows. And I've done that all over the world, and 90% of people touch their elbows, which is what I do, not what I say. It's like with kids, right? I've worked with a lot of kids. They do what you do, they don't do what you say. So it's the same with coaches. We have kind of fun ways of playing with that, but the basic messaging is there that if you're not embodying something yourself, then the other thing I'd say there is, like, if your client needs to go somewhere you can't go, you've got a problem. Right? Let's say your client wants to be really fiery and much more passionate and assertive. If you're scared of that, if you've found, if you've got whatever reason in your body as a coach, like a lot of coaches are quite empathic, they're quite nice, but they might lack that part. And it's like, well, how can you hold someone else's hand if you can't go there yourself?
I remember when we were doing the in-person trainings, and I think the last half year before, we couldn't do them. I'm not going to name, but I was leading one session, and I think it was a 2-hour session in total, and half of it was an Aikido hardcore bookend, like wooden sword practice. And I was showing up as the sensei, the teacher, and I made everybody like do a load of strikes and kick them out if I didn't do a correct. It was all part of the session, but I was very strict. And then after midway, we changed. We had a little break, and I did the very soft kind of intimacy connection, guiding into self-connection part. And people were confused, but also really inspired, because it just shows that element we talked about of range and being able to access whatever serves a person in that moment to bring them to a certain place. So while the first was maybe discipline and being confronted with challenge, the next was really self-connection and softness. To be able to go there yourself when you guide somebody else there is, wow, super.
Yeah, that evening was a head fuck to teach. I remember that evening. I used to do a play session after the hardcore Deaf Sensei session, like original play. But by the way, if people are wondering if they're watching this, like, do I have to do stuff in person? We have a course online. We don't have to get there in person. I used to think this was impossible, but I now realize as long as people go and do embodied practice locally with, local yoga studios, local conscious dance, they're still getting that in-person experience. I'd say it's not quite the same as a teacher. Like Alina, for example, I knew as a student, first of all, and then as a course manager, because of the Chinese plague, that's what I call it. Because of the Chinese plague, we hadn't actually been able to meet each other for a couple of years. And we just met, and I was like 90% knew who she was, but there was sort of 10, this experience, there was like 10% difference. And that could be, like in terms of how I give you feedback, or, what I think you might need to work on. Like there is a thing that even a really good online embodiment teacher might miss. And now our general approach is we have workshops which people add on. So rather than we used to say, right, you have to be in Britain 5 times a year and these dates, that was just really tricky for people practically. So now we do like a bunch of workshops, me and Christina and other teachers, and we basically just say, like, look, come to what you can. And I think most like Euro students come to a few. Often American students will fly over for 1 or 2. Look, I think I'm going to do New York next year. And then some are like the New Zealanders, wherever they can't do any, and that's fair enough. And they still certify in a way that I think is integrous. But it's definitely a nice add-on if you can do the in-person stuff.
Yeah, definitely. But what I would also underline here, it's not that important. I mean, if you can, right, cherry on top. But also the course, in how it is structured, it really gives you the feeling of, okay, I can walk away now and I know my shit. I know what I'm doing. I am certified in a proper way. So students walking away, they're confident. Hey?
Sorry, that's the benefit of online as well. you can spread out the learning. I don't know if you remember, Christina, when we used to do just in person, people were absolutely full up and popping by day 2 or 3 of a module because they're just full. There's only so much they can integrate. And we'd be like, more training, we've already got 5 days, you know. And now we just go, you know, rest, see you next week, see you next Tuesday. They're at home, they're safe and relaxed in their own environment, so it integrates better. They're not in some Bali retreat center that's all special and different where it stays there and doesn't integrate into their lives. So the integration's better, spreading it out is better. And the other thing I realized when I went to work online, I don't generally touch students anyway, right? Like physically, I'm not, I mean, occasionally I might show a bit of body work, like in Munich, right? I think 2 or 3 times I showed with one student a little bit of body work, like hands-on work. But most of the time, like you know, we develop this for corporate clients. You ain't touchy-feely. You're standing in a suit, talking, and they're doing exercises.
And I actually think that over the years now, also we've really found a way to make online, which could appear very disembodied, very much embodied. And I personally work a lot with clients as well online. So doing the whole course online. What noise?
Like whistling or something. What is it? Some crazy
animal. They're guiding the traffic down there.
Oh, okay. There's like a guy shouting and whistling. Sorry, what were you saying, Christina? The whistling disrupted me a minute. Yeah, you got whistling there. Give it a minute.
Focus. That while you might think that teaching embodiment or doing embodiment online is really like counterintuitive or like it might contradict itself, I think over the years we've really found that way to bring it extra into that environment that might seem disembodied, but it proves to be very, very useful to reach people. And I feel the regularity is much more important than these like bursts.
Yeah, and the other thing for me is
for sure,
just the regularity really helps, and also just reaching people in parts of the world. You know, we used to charge $5,000 for a face-to-face course. I think for Keck we're charging about 1,000. I think early bird rate's just a little bit under that. So it's, you know, like that's a huge difference in financial accessibility, which I think's way under, you know, everyone talks about privilege, but like by far the most important kind of privilege, by far the biggest barrier to doing stuff is money around the world. And to make it, you know, accessible that way. Also people with lots of kids, people in, you know, Bhutan and Zaire, and we've had, how many countries we had students from, Alina? I think pretty...
it was spread all over. I think it was at least 15 different ones in the last course.
More than that, definitely.
More than that, right? Yeah.
But the cross-cultural piece is also a bit of a specialism of the house, isn't it? Like, you know, obviously with Christina and I are from different countries. You know, we've got people on the team who are assisting from Kuwait, Slovenia, Croatia, obviously the US, Canada, Italy. That cross-cultural embodiment piece, I think, is one of our specialisms, as well as just like the pragmatism. What do you reckon, Christina? I don't. If I'm going to be a bit bitchy, I don't see that being done well elsewhere.
Now I'm worried about some whistling background noise when I unmute. No, I love the element of really being very international, which I haven't experienced so much in person, but now it's like even, you know, more so the case. And then meeting people in real life every now and then when it's international is really lovely too. I met somebody from Vietnam that was on one of our courses, I think 2 years ago. And then suddenly he was like, hey, do you remember me? Like in the middle of Thailand. And I'm like, what? Oh, wow. And that's like really nice surprises.
Getting stopped in the street is one of those things when you do big international kind of online things, isn't it? It does occasionally someone shouts at me from across the road. Oh, yeah. Okay, we said this is like beginner's guide then to embodiment coaching. Let's take it right back. If people are like, hey, maybe they're not, you know, obviously you're welcome to come on our courses at embodimentunlimited.com. Look us up. Certificate of Embodiment Coaching, Keck, look us up, you know, easy to find. We start beginning of February. We normally do an offer in Jan. We do a free event where people can get a taster so they can see that on the site. We do like me and you, I think, doing a sort of top tools in 3 days, you know, taste your event if people actually want to see some of the tools. But not everyone can train with us or wants to. So if we said like, what is the most basic thing for beginners? We've mentioned awareness and choice. We've mentioned your own embodiment. Like, what is like beginner's guide 101 to embodiment coaching?
We also touched the range that, yeah, you need to have the options to go at different spots or different embodiments. I think that's also crucial.
Someone mentioned saving time. Like, the first tool I think we teach on CEC is centering at the beginning of a call. So you have a coaching call or a coaching meeting, you do centering, you save 20 minutes of bullshit.
And it's true, guys. It's true.
That's literally true. Clients normally come straight, oh my God, oh, I'm all over the place, oh, I'm so stressed, my life's chaos. And then we're like, okay, put your feet on the floor, take a breath. Okay, tell me again what you want to get out of today's session, in brackets, without all the stress-related bullshit. And then people just go way more into the question. And you knew this as a coach, I'm sure, before, Alina, like the quality of someone's question is a large part of the success of that coaching, right?
Definitely having a clear and defined goal. That way you can actually work towards it, right? If it's all fuzzy and everywhere, yeah, where are you going? Such a difference, definitely.
Sometimes just getting people moving. Like whenever I'm teaching an event, I teach embodied coaching for 1, 2, 3 days. And then I say, right, you guys practice. We did this in Munich. And sometimes you'll see coaches just standing there talking, or they'll immediately take a chair. They'll say, right, let's get a chair. But you don't have to do coaching a chair. You can do it walking. You can do it upside down, right? You can do any kind of movement. And maybe we systematize that, like we do 4 elements brainstorming. Again, because any coach, you can ask the best verbal questions in the world. Like I've got my book of top coaching questions, or, I'm intuitively picking the best questions. And your coachee is just going to answer them from their embodiment. So it's something like 4 elements coaching, right? Here's 4 different ways of being, and they come up with 4 different sets of answers to their question, usually 1 or 2 of which are completely new. And that strikes me as a strong beginner's technique as well. I'm trying to think, what are some of your most simple ones? I mean, like the basic awareness pointing stuff we teach as well, which is good, isn't it? Like just saying to clients, hey, what do you do in your body when you talk about, whatever it is, your work, your mother, your promotion, whatever. And like just that, or, Curtis, who was my embodiment coach for a long time, sadly deceased now, Curtis Watkins, he used to just say, so what are you doing in your body around that? How's your breathing right now? How's your posture? Like when you talk about this, and I'll be, oh, I'm collapsed. And I'm like, how would it be like to not do that, Mark? So I used to speak. I'll be like, oh yeah, whole new point of view. Any sort of beginner practical go-tos you like, Christina? I just want to kind of, obviously some of the stuff really takes a bit more explaining, like distinction coaching and stuff like that. But any kind of super quick wins for listeners?
Occasionally I even like the leader follower, to have somebody copy a movement that I do on the screen. If it's in life, obviously it works slightly differently, and see their relationship to, leading, following, authority, stuff like that. But there can be so many small things. It's hard to pick one. Centering would be one of the ones that just every time.
Sorry, bit of a lag. I mean, what about toolkit poses? Do you find that either of you that people have got like favorite? Because we give this little few toolkit poses on CEC. There's a whole separate course with all of them. But do you find that people have kind of favorites as a coaches? I mean, self-care pose, for example. I feel like that's key to a lot of coaching.
I think being seen. I keep seeing a lot.
Like you're like particularly female students, right? Like the being able to take up space and be seen, or also guys?
Both, I think. Even just to step out as a coach, to be comfortable to work with somebody, to be a bit bigger. Yeah.
Never understood that problem. Never understood it.
For me, I find saying
privacy
no.
pose, Mark. Privacy pose.
The opposite, right? Well, that's a good example. We need one or the other usually. Yeah.
Definitely.
Alina?
Yeah. What I find is saying no is also a big one that is going around. So having clear boundaries, being defensive of them in a way, but that is not mean. So you can really embody a clear no without having this feeling of guilt and these parts. So this is what I saw a lot with students. Yeah,
it's a really good example, like I was saying earlier, that you can think about boundaries or you can embody it.
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's like, again, when I help students practice, you see them talk about boundaries. It's like, no. What are we actually embodying? A, to give them an experience of it. And then, as you say, B, some homework, a practice, like something they can do 1 minute a day, or we integrate it into their practice. Like if they're doing a yoga practice already, we can integrate it into a chaturanga or whatever as a way to integrate it. And now they've actually got a way of working on it. Like one of the things I hate, really, really annoys me, is people will say, I'm working on it. No, they're not. 99% of the time, what they mean is occasionally I think about it when there's a problem with it. That's what they mean.
Thinking about it, right?
They're not working with it. They're thinking about it occasionally and going, oh, I'm rubbish at this. If someone says they're working on it, I say, what's the key embodiment question? How? Right? And I'd say, how many minutes a day? What's your practice? How are you working on it? And like, we can actually answer that question, whether it's for being seen or boundaries or intimacy or, whatever the thing is. Cool. Okay. Where are we at? So I think there's some of the beginner stuff. Obviously, if people are, interested in what embodiment coaching actually looks like, there's demos we've got online. It's put Mark Walsh embodiment demo into YouTube, and you see some demos. We put little things on Instagram as well for those that follow us there. So Christina Dohr, do you want to Dohr, right?
Dohr, that's it.
Good. And Christina with a C. And Mark Walsh, WALSH. If people want to look into KEC, as I said, starts in Feb, but get in there early. I think we've 60 people have signed up for it already this year, and it's pre-Christmas, well, as time of recording. So it's the 14th of December today. So I think we'll expect another large group. I think I've released my live dates. Christina, if you've got live dates, do send them through so we can add them to the calendar of different workshops you're doing as well. Any other sort of final takeaways for Beginner's Guide to Embodiment Coaching that might be useful?
I think, experiencing it is a huge taster. So what I did back then when I was a student from you, Mark, watching your coaching demos and picking one where I felt like, okay, this is close to my heart as well, and following along. So not only watching, but actually doing what the coachee was doing, or what you were asking your coachee. It gave me such a big change for myself, and that really made me feel like, okay, this is powerful and this is something I want to pursue. So can highly recommend that.
I'd say we've been debating doing an evergreen version of the course where people watch a recorded video instead of a live Zoom call. And that's my only worry, is that people might not follow along. Because when we do a live call, cameras on, we all do the practices, unless people are feeling really grotty, it's, they're joining in. And that's so much more powerful than just sitting passively watching something, right? That's my only worry if we start to let people watch recordings as opposed to, attend live. It's just, I know what it's like to be there sitting on the couch and with my phone listening to the information, but it's
But maybe that is again about personal responsibility, right? So if you really want to learn something, as we talked before, you're not only learning through your brain, so use your body to really integrate it, and it changes so much. So I guess if someone wants to become an embodiment coach, that's the way.
It's like I've got a good book on embodiment coaching out, right? People like books, working with the body and training and coaching. It's very clear. It's nicely divided into chapters. We've been quite rambling today. The book is, it says, hey, here's the trauma stuff, here's the online stuff, here's the cultural stuff, and it's nicely laid out according to that embodied intelligence model. But it kind of amuses me when people read the book and they've got the book and I can see they've made notes, but it's like, okay, but are you practicing? Are you actually doing it? And I think there's no getting out of that with embodiment by definition, if you want to embody something. Cool. Okay, and what about lastly then, why now? Why, given the state of the world, do people need embodiment coaching? People come to us fresh to learn to be embodiment coaches as well, right? We take people who are just inspired, they want to become an embodiment coach. That's a good chunk of who we train as well. Why do you think people are inspired right now to become embodiment coaches? It's not necessarily the most firm career path, the most money anyone can ever make. Christina and I make a decent living, but we're not billionaires kind of thing. So it's why do you think people feel inspired now to become embodiment coaches?
Christina, you want to go?
I mean, I wouldn't say that there is necessarily more reason now than there was 5 years ago, except for we had a time when probably people got a little more disembodied in the last 2.5 years. Potentially.
Little more. Well, you were doing dancing contact improv in Thailand. Okay, the rest of us in the real world is a lot more disembodied, I'd say.
But I don't want to make it less relevant than 5 years ago, because I think equally 5 years ago, a lot of people were disembodied, and it might have gotten a little bit worse but just highlighted how disembodied we actually are as like a society, especially in the Western world.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, we've been in a hyper-cognitive culture which has lost its body and as a result lost its mind and its soul and its heart, you know, for a long, long time. That's a movement. Some people say since agriculture, some people say since Industrial Revolution, certainly sped up by technology.
I wanted to say, right? Everything that is developing right now. I mean, we could talk about different things, but definitely also for me a point. Technology is so present in our lives. So we're all glued to our chairs, sitting there, working the whole day. It's so easy to forget what this body is for. It's not a brain taxi, right? So yeah, bringing the quality in. And I also have the feeling that, yeah, also fed by the last 2 years, there's a sense of this wish for hope and wish for happiness in people. And to me, also coming from my study background, it really has this, we need the experience, we need the quality in our body to actually be happy and have this sense of fulfillment. And we're just trying to get that by creating nice thoughts. Yeah, well, it's a try, but it seems like it's not working that well. So I think it's time to change that.
Yeah, and I think there is an awareness that, like Gabor Mate's book, The Myth of Normal, Gabor and Daniel Mate, I should say, their book, The Myth of Normal, kind of people realize that we're living in a disconnected world. You know, but it's all about connection. Disconnection in one word is kind of like, you know, disconnection from self, disconnection from the environment, disconnection socially. We're lacking that co-regulation, to use the kind of trauma terminology there. And that, I think, well, I agree with Christina, that's a long-term trend, which, you know, this is why I walked into like Aikido dojo in 1874, whenever I, you know, many years ago when I started. It's like 25 years ago. That's why I walked into Aikido dojo, because something was profoundly wrong. You know, I often tell the story when I'm interviewed, like I was clever, like cognitively, I'd read a lot of books, I was a bright kid, but I was miserable to the point of being suicidal. I was alcohol addicted. I was screwing up a lot of relationships. You know, a lot of skills were lacking. You know, from basic self-care through to, you know, various other skills. And that's why I walked into an Aikido dojo intuitively, and I was lucky to do that. What I think has changed since then is the technological side, recent events, obviously. I think we've hit a critical mass. So this is maybe where I'm not sure if I differ or add to what Christina is saying, that while it, you know, existed 25 years ago when I walked into an Aikido dojo, people I know in the West are crazy now. Like the levels, if I just, you know, I was living in central Brighton, like walk down the street, drug addiction, alcohol addiction everywhere. People are, you know, self-medicating, essentially. Mm-hmm. The isolation, the weird attitudes towards certain things where people have got very weird identifications now, the polarization in politics where everyone's so dysregulated, they're screaming at each other, the way technology makes that worse. I feel like we're at a kind of critical point. Maybe we're always at a critical point in human history. I don't want to overdo it, but it does feel like we're at a critical point. And it's the people like I was dancing with last night who have kind of woken up to that. But everybody else just looks ragged. And I go, I'm happy to at least be part of some solution to that.
Yeah. Amen to that.
Amen. I was gonna say.
Yeah, no, feeling that today. Okay, so people listening, loads more resources online about this. I said there's the book. The podcast got episodes. I think 4 years ago I did an episode on working with the body on my own. This has been more interesting to it. It's a dialogue though, so thank you, ladies. Other resources out there, as I said, the main one is CEC, Certificate of Embodiment Coaching, or you can just do the foundations part if you don't want to become a coach or you're not a coach already. It's pretty affordable, various offers on the website. People can look at, you know, the times of day of the courses, the guest teachers we have, the exact curriculum, that's all there. I'm pretty sure if people just Google Certificate of Embodiment Coaching, it will come up, or it will definitely be linked on the Embodiment Unlimited website. So. Yeah.
And if you guys have any questions, reach out, right? I'm happy to answer.
A very organized, lovely German lady will answer all your questions so that I don't have to, and I can continue living in chaos. And Christina can keep dancing with the hippies on Koh Phangan and having a lovely life while you're with your Excel.
I love how you're never referring to me as the German anymore.
Right? I
must have
was
like-
also
No,
just
no,
thinking
no,
about
no,
it. Okay, a
no,
lovely German lady.
no,
Who was
no,
that
you're
now?
Christina. You'll always be Christina, and Alina will always be Alina. But you are not. You've lived with the hippies in Thailand way too long, Christina. You've been de-Germanified. I'm getting into it though. I love Munich. I'm getting into it. All right. The last thing I'd say there is we do make a lot of jokes and we have a lot of fun. And if things are a bit hard and depressing for people, I've heard people say yours are the only Zoom calls that I enjoy. Like we bring that lightheartedness to it. I'm not going to say the Americans take things a bit seriously, but they fucking do. Okay, they do. So I think the sort of taking ourselves not seriously while taking the work seriously is kind of a key thing. So that's not everyone's cup of tea. Who shouldn't come on Keck? Who shouldn't come?
People with no sense of humor.
Just people without a sense of humor, which isn't Germans, it's just hard to find. People who are super woke, that would be the same category. People who are super new age, right? Like we're not doing a course in like abstract chakra spirituality. And people aren't willing to do at least 4 or 5 hours a week of work, right? Like that's the other thing, right? There's a sort of practical commitment.
Also not people who are too dogmatic.
Oh yeah, the fundamentalists. There is only one way. It is yoga. You must do yoga this way. I'm German for the purposes of being a yoga Nazi. So yes, okay. I think we've been demonetized now. I think it's time to wrap this up. Thank you both very much.
Thank you, Mark.
Thank you. Yeah, definitely.